The slap echoed through Terminal B at LAX like a gunshot. The sound bounced off the floor and walls, cutting through all the noise of luggage, crying babies, and flight announcements. For a split second, the whole place went quiet. People just stopped walking. A little girl dropped her stuffed elephant, her mouth open in shock. A guy lowered his phone. A mom pulled her kid closer. Security guards by the exit turned their heads real quick, their hands already moving to their radios. And right in the middle of it all was Rashad Mitchell. His hand was still up in the air. His chest was going up and down like he was proud of himself. There was this smug smile on his face, the kind that said he thought he just showed someone who's boss. His fancy watch caught the light as his arm slowly came down. The watch was new. Expensive. The type a guy buys when he wants everyone to think he's got money. But the woman he just hit? She didn't fall back. She didn't cry. She didn't scream or beg or make herself small like he thought she would. She just stood there, one hand slowly going up to touch her red cheek. Her fingers pressed against the spot where it stung. And then she looked at him. Her eyes were cold. Colder than ice. Colder than anything Rashad had ever seen. She looked at him like he was already a dead man walking. Like she was just waiting for him to figure it out. Rashad's smile dropped for a second. Just long enough for a little doubt to creep in before his ego pushed it away. He had no idea what he just did. He had no idea who was watching. And he sure didn't know that the quiet woman standing in front of him, the one in the simple black dress, with the leather bag and the calm face, wasn't the same broken girl he walked out on 4 years ago. She was Mrs. Park Jun-ho now. And her husband doesn't let anyone disrespect what's his. 15 feet behind her, 2 guys in nice suits stood completely still. They'd been walking behind her all along, close enough to protect her, far enough that you wouldn't notice them. Now they stopped. One of them moved his hand inside his jacket. It was a small movement. Professional. The kind you only notice if you know what to look for. The other was already on his phone, talking fast in Korean, his voice too quiet for anyone to hear. They didn't step in. Not yet. But they didn't take their eyes off Rashad's face for a second. What happens when you slap a woman you think is powerless, but she's married to one of the scariest men on the West Coast? 4 years earlier, Imani Rivers was a totally different person. If you told her back then that one day she'd be standing in an airport wearing a ring worth more than her grandma's house, married to a man whose name scared powerful people, she would have laughed right in your face. Back then, laughing came easier. So did hope. So did believing that if you worked hard, sacrificed enough, kept your head down and followed the rules, life would eventually give you a break. She was wrong about that too. But we'll get to that. First, you need to know where Imani came from. Because the woman who stood in that airport, calm, cold, unbreakable, wasn't born that way. She was built. Piece by piece. Scar by scar. Imani grew up on West Florence Avenue in South Central Louisiana. If you've never been there, let me paint you a picture. It's the kind of neighborhood where you learn the difference between fireworks and gunshots before you're 10. Where the ice cream truck plays at 11 at night and nobody asks questions. Where front porches have metal bars and dreams have expiration dates. But it wasn't all bad. Imani's childhood had a soundtrack, and it was her grandma's gospel music playing on Sunday mornings. The smell of coffee before sunrise. The squeak of the door when Loretta Rivers came home after another double shift at Martin Luther King Jr. Community Hospital, her nurse scrubs wrinkled, her feet swollen, her hands shaking. Not from age. From being tired. Loretta Rivers was the only family Imani had. Her mom disappeared when Imani was 3, just walked out one night and never came back. No note. No call. Nothing. Imani learned early not to ask about it. The one time she did, she watched her grandma's face just crumble. Some people aren't meant to stay, baby, Loretta had whispered. And some of us are meant to survive them leaving. Imani never asked again. Instead, she learned. She watched. She soaked up everything her grandma taught her about surviving. How to stretch $20 into a week of food. How to walk with your head up even when your shoes had holes. How to smile at people who looked down on you, because their opinion meant nothing. And most important, nothing free in this world, baby. Everything costs. You just gotta decide what you're willing to pay. Imani decided early that she was willing to pay with everything she had. She studied while other kids played. She worked while other teenagers partied. She applied for every scholarship, every grant, every chance she could find. And when the acceptance letter from UCLA arrived, full ride, financial aid, the works, Loretta cried for an hour straight. You did it, baby, she kept saying. You got out. But getting out wasn't as simple as getting in. Imani almost lost that scholarship twice. Once during her junior year of high school, when Loretta collapsed at work and Imani missed 2 weeks of school sitting in hospital waiting rooms. And once during her sophomore year of college, when the bills stacked so high that she sat in the library at 2 a.m., looking at withdrawal forms, ready to give up everything she'd worked for. Both times, she found a way through. She always found a way through. She graduated with honors. Got a job at a private equity firm in Century City. Wore a blazer that actually fit for the first time in her life. Looked at herself in the mirror and thought, I made it. She thought the hard part was over. She thought the universe owed her some peace. She was wrong. Because 3 months after starting that job, she was going to meet a guy named Rashad Mitchell. And he was going to teach her that some prisons don't have bars. They have smiles. They have compliments. They have promises whispered in the dark. They have hands that hold you gently before they start to squeeze. And by the time you realize you're trapped, it's already too late. But we'll get to Rashad. First, you need to understand who Imani was before he wrecked her. Because the woman who stood in that airport, calm, cold, and unbreakable, she was built from the ashes of the girl Rashad burned. And that fire? It started with her grandma's death. Imani was 14 years old the first time she understood that love could kill you slowly. It wasn't some dramatic realization. Just a regular Tuesday. She came home from school to find her grandmother, Loretta, sitting at the kitchen table, still in her hospital scrubs, staring at a pile of bills. Loretta didn't know Imani was watching. For just a moment, her face showed everything she usually kept hidden, the exhaustion, the worry, the bone-deep tiredness that never went away. Then Loretta looked up, saw Imani, and just like that, the mask slid back into place. She smiled. Asked about school. Started dinner like nothing was wrong. But Imani had seen it. And she knew, her grandmother was killing herself slowly, day by day, just to keep them afloat. That's what love looked like in their world. It wasn't flowers and chocolate. It was sacrifice that hollowed you out from the inside. Loretta Rivers was 58 years old, but she looked 70. 31 years as a nurse's aide at Martin Luther King Jr. Community Hospital will do that to you. Hands always dry from washing, back always aching, feet always swollen. But she never missed a shift. Not once. Not even when her back gave out so bad she had to wear a brace under her scrubs. Can't afford sick days, she'd say, swallowing aspirin dry before heading out the door. She'd been raising Imani alone since Imani was 3, when her daughter, Imani's mother, just disappeared one night. No note. No call. No explanation. Just gone. Imani never asked much about her mom. Not because she didn't care, but because the one time she did ask, her grandmother's face did something Imani had never seen before. It crumpled. Like paper being crushed in a fist. Some people aren't meant to stay, baby, Loretta had whispered. And some of us are meant to survive them leaving. Imani never asked again. Instead, she learned other things from her grandmother. Important things. How to stretch $20 into a week of meals. How to walk with your head up even when your shoes had holes. How to smile at people who looked down on you because their opinion was worth less than the dirt on your heel. How to survive. Their little house in Limert Park wasn't much, but it was theirs. The roof leaked when it rained. The pipes groaned in the winter. But the kitchen always smelled like Loretta's gumbo on Sundays. The porch was where they'd sit in the evenings, watching the neighborhood slowly change around them, some parts getting better, most getting worse. And until Imani was 16, they shared the only bedroom. Loretta on the bed, Imani on a mattress on the floor. Close enough that Imani could hear her grandmother's breathing at night, the rhythm that told her she wasn't alone. Not yet. Imani was smart. Not just regular smart. The kind of smart that made teachers pull her aside after class and say, "You could really be something." At Crenshaw High School, she was top of her class. The kind of student who made teachers remember why they became teachers in the first place. She did every assignment. Asked questions nobody else thought to ask. Stayed after school for help even when she didn't need it. Ms. Jackson, the guidance counselor, was the first one who mentioned UCLA. "You've got the grades for it, Imani. And they've got scholarships. Full rides." Imani laughed. "People like me don't go to UCLA. People like you?" Ms. Jackson raised an eyebrow. "You mean brilliant people? Hard-working people? People who deserve a shot?" When the acceptance letter came, full scholarship, room and board, the whole thing, Loretta cried for an hour straight. Just sat at the kitchen table, letter in her hands, tears dripping onto the paper. "You did it, baby," she kept saying. "You really did it." But junior year of high school, it almost all fell apart. November. Cold for LA, Imani was in chemistry class when the office called her down. Her grandmother had collapsed at work. Heart episode, they said. Not a full attack, but close. For 2 weeks, Imani barely left the hospital. She slept in waiting room chairs. Filled out paperwork she didn't understand. Called the electric company to beg for an extension on the bill. Missed test after test after test. When she finally went back to school, she was so far behind it felt impossible to catch up. Her grades dropped. Then dropped more. Then the scholarship committee sent a warning letter. Imani sat in the hospital parking lot, letter in hand, and made a decision. She got a job. Nights. At a gas station on Crenshaw Boulevard. The kind of place with bulletproof glass between you and the customers. She did homework between transactions. Studied during slow periods. Slept maybe 3 hours a night. Sometimes less. 6 weeks later, her grades were back up. Nobody at school knew what it had cost her. Nobody knew how close she'd come to losing everything. When Loretta finally came home, she was weaker, but alive. The first thing she tried to do was go back to work. Imani begged her to rest. Just for a while. Loretta laughed. That deep laugh that started in her chest. Rest is for people who can afford it, baby. Freshman year at UCLA hit Imani like a cold wave. Suddenly she was surrounded by kids who'd never had to worry about anything real. Kids with cars. Kids whose parents visited on weekends with groceries and spending money. Kids with credit cards for emergencies. Imani had bus passes, a scholarship that covered just enough, and a grandmother who called every Sunday from a phone with a cracked screen. She felt like she'd landed on another planet. She made it through freshman year. Barely. Not because the work was hard, that part she could handle, but because everything else was. The social stuff. The constant reminder that you didn't belong. The weird looks when you said you couldn't go out because you were working your campus job. Then sophomore year hit, and it got worse. Loretta's hours got cut at the hospital. Budget issues, they said. The house needed a new water heater, the old one leaked so bad they had to keep buckets under it. The roof got worse. And then the property taxes came due, higher than ever because the neighborhood was up and coming. Imani considered dropping out. Not because she wanted to, but because maybe Loretta needed her at home more than she needed a degree. One night, she sat in the library at 2 a.m., staring at withdrawal forms, and cried for the first time in years. Not the quiet tears she'd learned to hide. Full, body-shaking sobs that got her kicked out of the quiet section. She was sitting outside on a bench, still crying, when Professor Hayes found her. Hayes taught economics. Tough class. Tougher professor. But she sat next to Imani on that bench and just waited. When Imani finally managed to explain, Hayes didn't offer pity. She offered something better. There's an emergency grant program, she said. And the econ department needs research assistants. And there's a tutor position open at the learning center. 3 jobs. On top of classes. It shouldn't have been possible. But Imani did it. Not just survived it, thrived in it. She graduated with honors 3 years later, not despite the struggle, but because of it. The struggle had made her bulletproof. The private equity firm in Century City was like stepping into a different universe. Glass walls. Expensive coffee machines. People in suits who'd never known what it was like to be hungry. Really hungry. The kind of hungry that keeps you up at night. Imani got a cubicle. Small, but hers. She got business cards with her name on them. She got a salary that made her double-check the offer letter because surely there was a decimal point in the wrong place. For the first time in her life, she could breathe. She started putting money away. For the house. For Loretta. For a future that finally seemed possible. She had no idea that in 3 months, a man with a charming smile and empty promises would take all of it. Every single penny. His name was Rashad Mitchell. He walked into her life at a company mixer, wearing confidence like cologne. Suit that fit just right. Smile that lit up the room. The kind of man who knew exactly how handsome he was. When he headed straight for Imani, standing alone near the edge of the rooftop bar, she almost looked behind her to see who he was really aiming for. But it was her. He wanted to talk to her. And he made her laugh for the first time in months. So Imani, for the first time in her life, let her guard down. That was her first mistake. It wouldn't be her last. The night Imani met Rashad Mitchell, she was wearing a dress she'd bought at a thrift store and heels that pinched her toes. She didn't belong at that company mixer. She knew it. Everyone knew it. But Rashad looked at her like she was the only person in the room. That should have been her first warning. The company mixer was at some fancy rooftop bar in downtown LA. The kind of place Imani would never go on her own. City lights stretching out forever in every direction. Champagne flowing like water. People laughing too loud about their vacation homes and investment portfolios. Imani stood near the edge of the roof, as far from everyone as she could get without actually jumping off. Her supervisor had strongly encouraged attendance, which everyone knew wasn't optional. So here she was, in her thrift store dress, nursing the same glass of champagne for 2 hours straight because she couldn't afford another. She was counting the minutes until she could leave without it looking bad. 112 minutes to go. That's when he appeared beside her, like he'd just materialized out of the night air. Tall. Confident. With a smile that could probably sell ice to polar bears. "You look like you'd rather be anywhere else," he said. Imani didn't smile back. That obvious? Only to someone who feels the same way. She glanced at him sideways. He didn't look like someone who felt out of place. His suit fit too well. His watch looked expensive. His haircut probably cost more than her dress. "I'm Rashad," he said. "Regional sales manager over at Pharmatech." Imani. Junior analyst. First company event? She nodded. "They get worse," he said, and that made her laugh. They talked for 20 minutes straight. He told her he was new money, too. Said he knew what it was like to feel like an outsider in places like this. Talked about growing up in Inglewood, about clawing his way up, about proving everyone wrong. She wouldn't find out until much later that it was all a lie. But that night, Standing on that rooftop with the lights of LA spread out below them, it felt real. He made her laugh for the first time in months. Made her forget the pinching in her toes. Made her stop counting the minutes. Their first date was at Roscoe's House of Chicken and Waffles on Pico Boulevard. "I could take you somewhere fancy," he'd said when he asked her out. "But honestly, those places make me uncomfortable. Too stuffy." Another lie, but a good one. The kind that made her like him more. They sat in a booth for 4 hours, talking about everything and nothing. He asked about her dreams. Her family. Her favorite books. He actually seemed to listen when she answered. When he walked her to her car, he didn't try to kiss her. Just squeezed her hand and said, "I want to do this right. You're different." The pattern started. Subtle at first, perfect in its execution. Flowers delivered to her office. Just once, not enough to seem over the top, but enough to make the other women notice. Texts during the day that made her smile in the middle of boring meetings. Phone calls where he actually listened instead of just waiting for his turn to talk. Plans he always followed through on. Never late. Never canceling. Always exactly where he said he'd be, when he said he'd be there. Imani didn't trust easily. Life had taught her better than that. But Rashad was patient. Consistent. He never pushed. Never rushed. He seemed content just to be near her. And slowly, carefully, she started to believe. Started to think maybe this was real. Maybe she deserved this. Maybe the universe was finally paying her back for all those years of struggle. 3 months in, she brought him to dinner at the house in Limert Park. Loretta cooked her famous gumbo. Put a tablecloth on the table. Wore her good dress, the one she saved for church. Rashad charmed her, of course. Brought flowers. Complimented the food. Asked all the right questions about her nursing career. Helped clear the table without being asked. But later, after he left, Loretta watched Imani doing the dishes with this look on her face. "He's charming, baby." "That's a good thing, Grandma." Loretta paused. Sometimes. Sometimes it's just a costume." Imani rolled her eyes. Dismissed it. The first time she didn't listen to her grandmother's wisdom. Looking back, Imani would realize her grandmother had seen through Rashad from the very first dinner. But love makes you blind. And by the time Imani opened her eyes, she'd already lost everything. Real quick, if you're still here, that means you're invested in Imani's story. I respect that. But here's the thing, YouTube only shows these stories to new people when the algorithm sees engagement. That means likes, comments, and subscriptions. So if you're watching and you haven't done any of those things yet, you're basically enjoying the story in secret. And that's fine, but it doesn't help other people find it. If you think Imani's story deserves to be heard, take 3 seconds. Smash that subscribe button and let me know in the comments where you're watching from. Alright, back to the story. Because things are about to get worse. 6 months into dating, they moved in together. The apartment on Pico Boulevard was Rashad's idea. "We're spending all our time together anyway," he said. "Why pay 2 rents?" It made sense. Or Imani wanted it to make sense, which isn't the same thing, but close enough when you're in love. The apartment was nice. 2 bedrooms. Hardwood floors. A kitchen with an island. The kind of place Imani had always dreamed of but never thought she'd actually have. Rent, $2,400 a month. Rashad's contribution, promises. Imani's contribution, everything else. He always had an excuse ready. His commission check was late. He had an unexpected expense. He'd definitely make it up next month. He was good for it. She didn't notice at first. The money draining from her savings. The bills always landing on her side of the table. The way his, "I'll handle it," never actually meant anything. She was too busy being in love. Too busy believing the dream he'd painted. too busy ignoring the warnings her grandmother kept dropping like breadcrumbs. "He sure does spend a lot for someone who's always short on rent," Loretta said one Sunday. "He works hard," Imani defended him. "He deserves nice things." "So do you, baby. So do you." There were signs. Looking back, there were so many signs. The phone calls he always took in another room, voice dropping to a whisper. The receipts for restaurants she'd never been to, tucked in his jacket pockets. The cologne that sometimes smelled different when he came home late. The way he changed the subject whenever she asked about his friends, his family, anyone from his past. But she told herself stories to make it all okay. He was private. That's normal. He was stressed about work. That's understandable. She was overthinking. That's her problem. She should trust him. That's what love requires. 8 months into their relationship, Imani discovered she was pregnant. She was terrified. Excited. Overwhelmed. She went to the store and bought a little onesie, yellow, neutral, soft as a cloud. She hid it in her drawer, taking it out sometimes just to touch it, to make it feel real. She practiced the words in the mirror, "We're having a baby." She imagined his face. The joy. The tears. The way he'd lift her up and spin her around like in the movies. She cooked his favorite dinner. Lit candles. Wore a dress he liked. And when the moment came, when she finally said those words, "Rashad, I'm pregnant," she didn't see joy on his face. She saw something else entirely. Something that made her blood run cold. The moment Imani told Rashad she was pregnant, something in his eyes flickered and died. She told herself she imagined it. She told herself he was just surprised. She told herself a lot of things in those final weeks. None of them were true. The scene should have been perfect. Their apartment on Pico Boulevard, with evening light streaming through the windows. Imani had spent all afternoon cooking Rashad's favorite meal, jerk chicken with rice and plantains. She'd even bought his favorite beer, the expensive kind from that craft brewery he wouldn't shut up about. She was nervous in a way she hadn't been since their first date. Palms sweaty. Heart racing. Stomach doing flips that had nothing to do with the pregnancy. She waited until they were halfway through dinner. "Rashad, I need to tell you something." He looked up from his phone. Distracted. Already somewhere else in his head. "I'm pregnant." The silence that followed wasn't the warm, tearful, joyful silence you see in movies. It was cold. Empty. The kind of silence that feels like a door slamming shut. His face gave nothing away. Like he was calculating something behind his eyes. "Are you sure?" he finally asked. "I took 3 tests. And I saw a doctor. I'm sure." His jaw tightened. He set down his fork slowly, deliberately, like he was afraid it might break. "I need time to think." Just like that, he stood up. Grabbed his keys from the counter. And left. Imani sat at the table for 2 hours, food getting cold, candles burning down to stubs. He didn't come home until 3 a.m. She was still awake, lying in bed, staring at the ceiling. He slid under the covers without a word. Didn't touch her. Didn't explain. Just turned his back and pretended to sleep. She lay there, telling herself this was normal. Men get scared. That's what everyone says. He just needs time. He'll come around. She pressed her hand to her stomach, to the tiny life growing inside her, and whispered, "It's going to be okay. Daddy just needs a minute." Day 1 after the news, Rashad was physically present but mentally gone. He moved around the apartment like a ghost. When she tried to talk to him, he gave one-word answers. Never made eye contact. "We need to talk about this," she finally said over dinner. "I'm processing," he said, still not looking at her. "Process with me. That's what partners do." "Not now, Imani." And that was it. Conversation over. Day 2 was worse. He left before she woke up. Didn't come home until after 10. His phone kept buzzing with messages that he never answered in front of her. Around midnight, she got up to get some water and found him in the living room, staring at his laptop. The blue light reflected in his eyes. He closed it the second he saw her. "What are you looking at?" she asked. "Work stuff." "At midnight?" "Go back to bed, Imani." Day 3, she woke up alone. The apartment felt different somehow. Emptier. She walked to the closet they shared. His side was half empty. The good suits were gone. The expensive shoes. The watch box. In the bathroom, his toothbrush was missing. His fancy face wash. The cologne she'd given him for his birthday. Her heart pounding, she ran to her laptop. Opened the banking app. Logged into their joint account, the one where she kept her savings. 6 years of scrimping and sacrificing. $12,000. Every penny she'd managed to put away since high school. Balance, $0. Last withdrawal, $12,000. Cash. Time, 6:47 a.m. That morning. She stared at the screen for a long time. Not understanding. Not wanting to understand. Then she grabbed her phone and called him. The automated voice, "We're sorry, but the number you have dialed has been disconnected." She tried his work. The receptionist sounded confused. "Rashad Mitchell? He doesn't work here anymore. He quit 2 weeks ago." 2 weeks. Before she told him about the baby. He'd already been planning his exit. She tried calling the few friends of his she'd met. Numbers that either didn't answer or didn't work. She realized, sitting there with her useless phone, that she didn't really know anyone in his life. Not really. Except Marcus. His cousin. The only relative of Rashad she'd actually met. Marcus answered on the 4th ring. "Hello? Marcus, it's Imani. I can't find Rashad. Something's wrong." A long pause. Too long. "Imani, you don't know?" Her stomach dropped. "Know what?" "He left. For Atlanta. With Destiny." "Who's Destiny?" Another pause. Look, I thought you knew. They've been together for months. She works at some tech startup. He said you two were already broken up." Imani sat on the kitchen floor, her legs suddenly unable to hold her up. "Already broken up?" "Yeah, he told everybody it was over between you guys back in January. Said you were just roommates until the lease was up." January. 4 months ago. While they were still sleeping in the same bed. While he was still telling her he loved her. While she was still paying for everything. Marcus kept talking. Apologizing. Explaining what he knew. But Imani didn't hear most of it. She just kept thinking, he told people we were already broken up. While living in her apartment. Spending her money. Planning his escape. He never loved her. She was just a stop along the way. 2 weeks later, the pain started at work. It was sharp. Sudden. Wrong. A cramping that doubled her over at her desk. She drove herself to the hospital because she didn't have anyone else to call. Loretta was working a shift on the other side of the building, but Imani couldn't bring herself to interrupt. Couldn't bear to see the worry on her grandmother's face. The "I told you so" that would never be spoken but would hang in the air between them. The doctor was kind. Young. A woman with tired eyes and gentle hands. "I'm sorry. The pregnancy isn't viable." She kept talking. Medical terms. Statistics. Explanations about stress and the body's response to trauma. How common miscarriages are in the first trimester. How it wasn't Imani's fault. Imani heard none of it. She just kept thinking, he took everything. Even this. They gave her medication. Instructions. A pamphlet about grief counseling that she threw away in the hospital parking lot. She told no one. She went back to work 3 days later. She smiled when people asked how she was doing. Fine, she'd say. Just a stomach bug. She cried only in the shower, where no one could hear her, where she could pretend the water on her face wasn't tears. Life went on. Somehow. Imani moved out of the apartment she couldn't afford. Found a cheaper place closer to her grandmother's house. Picked up extra hours at work. Started trying to rebuild her savings, one painful dollar at a time. She didn't date. Didn't even think about it. Just focused on surviving. On putting one foot in front of the other. On pretending she was okay when people asked. Loretta knew something was wrong, of course. Grandmothers always know. But she didn't push. Just made sure Imani ate when she came over. Made sure she knew she wasn't alone. Whatever happened, baby, it's not the end of your story. Just a bad chapter. Imani wanted to believe that. She really did. But then, 1 month after Rashad left, her phone rang at 4 a.m. Nobody calls at 4 a.m. with good news. It was the hospital. Loretta had collapsed again. Major heart attack this time. She'd been stocking supplies when it happened. A coworker found her. You need to come now, the nurse said. The tone said everything else. This time, she wouldn't be coming home. People say rock bottom is where you start to rebuild. They're wrong. Rock bottom is just where you think the falling stops. But sometimes, there's a basement beneath it. And a cellar beneath that. Imani was about to discover how deep the pit really went. MLK Community Hospital looked different from the other side of the bed. Loretta Rivers had walked these halls for 31 years. She knew every corner, every supply closet, every shortcut. She'd held patients' hands in these rooms, changed their sheets, brought them comfort when nobody else would. Now she was in room 412, connected to machines that beeped in steady, mocking rhythms. Her skin looked gray against the white sheets. Her hands, those strong hands that had held Imani through every storm, lay limp on the blanket. The nurses came in more often than they needed to. They knew Loretta. Loved her. Some of them cried when they saw her lying there, this woman who'd trained them, who'd covered their shifts when their kids were sick, who'd brought homemade gumbo to every potluck. Heart failure, the doctor told Imani quietly in the hallway. Young guy. Probably around Imani's age. Looked like he hadn't slept in days. Years of overwork took their toll. She should have retired years ago. Her body just couldn't keep going. Imani wanted to scream, she couldn't retire. She had me to take care of. She had bills to pay. She had no choice. But she just nodded. Said thank you. Asked about treatment options. There weren't many. For 5 days, Imani barely left the room. She sat beside her grandmother, reading to her from those romance novels Loretta pretended not to like but secretly loved. Talking about nothing important. Holding her hand. Loretta drifted in and out of consciousness. Sometimes she knew Imani was there. Sometimes she didn't. In her lucid moments, she squeezed Imani's hand and whispered, I'm so proud of you, baby. Don't leave me, Grandma. Please. Imani didn't care that she sounded like a child. She was a child. A scared, lonely child about to lose her only family. Loretta smiled, weak but warm. I'm not leaving, sweetheart. I'm just going ahead. Saving you a seat. On the 6th day, at 3:47 a.m., the machine stopped beeping. Imani felt the hand in hers go slack. She didn't scream. Didn't cry. She'd used up all her tears during those 5 days. She just sat there, holding on to the only person who had ever truly loved her, and felt the last piece of her old life slip away. The funeral was small. A little church in Limert Park where Loretta had gone every Sunday. Neighbors Imani barely knew stood up and said kind words about a woman they didn't really understand. The pastor spoke about glory and heaven and peace, words that bounced off Imani like rain on a window. The casket cost more than Imani could afford. The life insurance policy Loretta had managed to keep paid for most of it, but not all. Imani put the rest on a credit card. One more bill she couldn't pay. There was no Rashad. No family. Just Imani, standing alone at the grave, watching dirt fall onto the only love she'd ever known. Later, she went back to the house in Limert Park. Her house now, she supposed. Empty. Quiet. Loretta's reading glasses still on the nightstand. Her apron still hanging in the kitchen. The smell of her perfume, something cheap but sweet from the drugstore, slowly fading from the hallways. Imani sat on the couch and stared at nothing for a very long time. That's when Imani realized something terrifying. She had no one left. No family. No friends close enough to call. No Rashad. No grandmother. Just an empty house and a mountain of bills. The apartment on Pico Boulevard was gone. Imani couldn't afford it without the savings Rashad stole. She moved back into her grandmother's house, the house with the leaking roof and the broken water heater and the memories that hurt to walk through. Every night she slept in Loretta's bed. It still smelled like her. Imani knew that smell would fade eventually, and she dreaded that day more than anything. 2 weeks after the funeral, HR called her in for a conversation. The woman across the desk had perfectly manicured nails and a practiced sympathetic expression. Imani, we understand you've been through a difficult time, but your performance has slipped significantly. The absences, the missed deadlines. Imani nodded. Didn't argue. Didn't explain. What was the point? We're going to have to let you go. We're providing 2 weeks severance, which is generous considering your short tenure with us. Just like that, the fancy job in Century City was gone too. She went home and looked at her finances. The reality was brutal. Mortgage, 3 months behind. Utilities, shut-off notices piling up. Savings, 0. Credit, destroyed. Rashad had opened cards in her name. She discovered them too late. She had maybe 3 weeks before they turned off the electricity. Maybe a month before foreclosure started. She found work at a warehouse in Vernon. Night shift. Sorting packages. Minimum wage. No benefits. No future. She worked from 11 p.m. to 7 a.m., then came home to an empty house and slept until 9 p.m. She ate ramen for dinner. Sometimes rice with hot sauce. She told herself it was temporary. Days turned into weeks. Weeks into months. Temporary started to feel permanent. Her hands cracked and bled from handling cardboard all night. Her back ached constantly. Her feet swelled in the cheap shoes she couldn't afford to replace. She was becoming her grandmother. Working herself to death just to survive. The very thing she had gone to college to avoid. 6 months after Loretta's death, Imani stood in the bathroom, staring at her reflection. She didn't recognize the woman looking back. Hollow eyes. Sunken cheeks. Hair she'd stopped caring for. The sink was dripping. She couldn't afford a plumber. She tried to fix it herself but only made it worse. The drip sounded like a countdown. She thought about giving up. Really giving up. Not in a dramatic way. Just stopping. Letting the house go. Letting the debt collectors win. Letting herself disappear. What was the point? Everyone who loved her was gone. Everyone who claimed to love her had lied. She was invisible. She stood there for a long time. Watching the water drip. Watching the stranger in the mirror. Then she turned off the bathroom light and walked to the kitchen. She made ramen. She ate it. She set an alarm for work. She chose to survive. Not because she believed things would get better. But because Loretta hadn't raised a quitter. And if nothing else, Imani refused to let her grandmother down. 3 days later, Imani walked into a coffee shop on Wilshire Boulevard. It was her one luxury. Once a week, on her day off, she'd spend $2 on plain black coffee and sit for hours with books from the public library. The baristas didn't bother her as long as she bought something, and the place had free Wi-Fi. Today she had a book on corporate restructuring and a yellow highlighter. She was trying to teach herself enough to maybe, someday, start over. She didn't notice the man watching her from across the room. She didn't know that his name was Park Joon-ho. Or that he had been looking for her for 3 months. Or that her grandmother had saved his mother's life 20 years ago. She just ordered her coffee and started highlighting. And her entire life was about to change. Park Joon-ho was not a man who believed in coincidence. He believed in cause and effect. Action and consequence. Debts owed and debts repaid. And he had owed a debt to Loretta Rivers for 20 years. Now she was gone. But her granddaughter remained. And Joon-ho always paid what he owed. In Koreatown, they called him the Ghost. Not because he was scary, though he was, but because he moved through the world without leaving fingerprints. His suits were custom-made but never flashy. His car was expensive but not ostentatious. He spoke softly, rarely drank, and never lost his temper in public. When people described Park Joon-ho, they used words like careful and patient. The smart ones also added dangerous. But 20 years ago, he wasn't the Ghost yet. He was just a college kid whose world almost fell apart on a Tuesday afternoon in Long Beach. The warehouse fire started small. Electrical problem, they said later. Spark in the wrong place. Bad wiring. Bad luck. Park's son, he wasn't supposed to be there. She was just checking on a shipment for her husband's import business, a business that moved things through customs that customs wasn't supposed to see. She'd promised to be quick. Just sign the papers and go. But the fire spread fast. 1 minute, smoke. The next, flames climbing the walls like living things. Son, he ran for the back door. Found it blocked by fallen shelving. Tried to move it, but the metal was already too hot. The smoke filled her lungs. Made her dizzy. Made her fall. Her last thought before passing out, my son. My Joon-ho. That should have been the end of her story. But Loretta Rivers had other plans. Loretta, 38 years old, was driving past on her way home from a double shift at the hospital. She'd taken a different route that day, road work on her usual street. Another non-coincidence. She saw the smoke. Pulled over. Didn't hesitate. Later, firefighters would say she shouldn't have gone in. Too dangerous. Too stupid. But Loretta Rivers didn't care about should. She wrapped her sweater around her face. Ran into the burning building. Somehow found Sunhee unconscious near the back door. Dragged her out, her arms burning with the effort, her lungs screaming for air. Outside, she performed CPR until the ambulance arrived. Got Sunhee's heart beating again. Saved her life. And then, before anyone could get her name, before the Park family could thank her, she disappeared. Joon-ho's father spent 2 years looking for the woman who saved his wife. Park Sung-ho wasn't a man who left debts unpaid. Good debts or bad. His business operated on that principle. So he used every resource at his disposal, legal and otherwise, to find this mystery woman. Private investigators. Hospital records. Security camera footage. Witness statements. When they finally tracked her to MLK Community Hospital, Loretta wanted nothing to do with their gratitude. I did what anyone would do, she told the investigator they sent. A tall man in an expensive suit who looked uncomfortable in Limert Park. I don't need money. I need to get back to work. Sung-ho tried anyway. Sent gifts. Offered to pay her mortgage. Offered her a new car. Offered her a job with triple her current salary. She refused everything. Tell Mr. Park his wife is alive. That's all the payment I need. So the Parks kept their distance. But they didn't forget. When Junho was old enough to understand, his mother told him the story. Showed him the scar on her arm from the fire. Told him who had saved her. Remember this woman's name, son, he said. Loretta Rivers. We owe her everything. When Park Sung-ho died in 2015, cancer, fast and merciless, he made Junho promise one thing. Watch over that woman. And if she ever needs anything, anything at all, you give it to her. Without question. Without expectation. You owe her our entire family. Junho agreed. He'd taken over the family business by then. Expanded it. Made it more legitimate on the surface. But he remembered his roots. Remembered his debts. He kept tabs on Loretta from a distance. Made sure the hospital never cut her hours. Made sure the property taxes on her house were quietly reduced. Small things. Invisible things. But he never approached. Loretta had made it clear she wanted nothing from them. Then, 6 months ago, Junho got a call from his contact at the hospital. Loretta Rivers died last night. Heart failure. Junho attended the funeral. Stood in the back. Left before anyone noticed. He watched her granddaughter stand alone at the grave. Watched her crumble without falling. And he made a new promise, he would find a way to repay the debt. Through her. It took him 3 months to find Imani. She'd moved. Changed jobs. Disappeared into the invisible workforce that keeps cities running while the rest of the world sleeps. But Junho was patient. He had people. Resources. They found her working night shifts at a warehouse in Vernon. Living in her grandmother's old house in Limert Park. Drowning in debt that wasn't all hers. He could have approached her directly. Offered money. Solved her immediate problems. But Junho understood people. Understood pride. Understood that someone like Imani, someone who had pulled herself up once already, wouldn't want charity. So he watched. Waited. Looked for an opening. And finally found one at a small coffee shop on Wilshire Boulevard. The coffee shop was nothing special. Worn leather chairs. The smell of burnt espresso. Music just loud enough to provide privacy but not so loud you couldn't hear yourself think. Imani sat at a corner table, book open, yellow highlighter moving in focus strokes. Junho watched her from across the room. He had been coming here for 2 weeks. Not every day, that would be obvious. Just enough to watch. To understand. She always ordered the cheapest thing on the menu. She always stayed until they closed. She always read books about business, finance, strategy. She never smiled. Today she looked more tired than usual. Dark circles under her eyes. Hair pulled back in a simple ponytail. Clothes clean but worn. The look of someone who has just enough energy to keep moving and not a drop more. Junho waited until she'd been there an hour. Until she'd settled into the rhythm of reading, highlighting, sipping her coffee. Then he made his move. He sat down across from her without asking. She didn't look up for almost 30 seconds. Just kept highlighting. Like maybe if she ignored him, he'd go away. When she finally did look up, her eyes held no fear. No curiosity. Just exhaustion. Can I help you? Her voice was flat. Maybe, he said. I'm not sure yet. That's not an answer. Neither was your question. She stared at him. Really looked at him for the first time. Taking in the tailored coat. The quiet confidence. The way he sat, relaxed but alert, like a cat watching something interesting. Look, I'm busy. So unless you need something specific. What are you reading? She sighed. Turned the book so he could see the cover. Corporate restructuring. Sounds riveting. It's not. Then why read it? She paused. Something flickered in her eyes. Because I'm teaching myself to start over. Start over from what? From nothing. He nodded slowly. I know something about that. Imani wasn't sure why she was still talking to this stranger. Maybe because he wasn't hitting on her. Maybe because she was too tired to tell him to go away. Maybe because it had been months since she'd had a real conversation with anyone. She looked at him, really looked, for the first time. Expensive coat that didn't try to look expensive. Calm demeanor. Eyes that held too much knowledge for someone who looked to be in his late 30s. An accent she couldn't quite place, soft around the edges of his words. Who are you? Someone who owes you a debt. She frowned. I've never met you before. No. But your grandmother saved my mother's life. And I've been waiting for a chance to repay that. Imani felt like she'd been punched in the chest. Just hearing someone say, grandmother, made her throat tighten. What are you talking about? Loretta Rivers. She pulled my mother from a burning building 20 years ago. Performed CPR. Saved her life. Imani's mind raced. Loretta had never mentioned anything like that. But then, Loretta didn't talk much about the things she did. Just did them. That sounds like her, Imani said quietly. My name is Park Junho. My family has owed yours a debt for a very long time. She closed her book. Slowly. Deliberately. I don't need charity. I'm not offering charity. Then what are you offering? A conversation. Coffee. Maybe a meal sometime. Why? Because you're sitting in a coffee shop, teaching yourself corporate restructuring from a library book, after working a night shift at a warehouse, and you haven't given up yet. That's interesting to me. Imani's eyes narrowed. How do you know where I work? Junho didn't blink. I make it my business to know things. That's not an answer. It's the truth. She gathered her book, her highlighter, her cheap backpack. I don't know you. That's the point of conversations. To change that. And if I say no? Then I leave. And I find another way to repay the debt. There is no debt. Your grandmother would disagree. At the mention of Loretta, something shifted in Imani's face. Pain. Fresh and sharp, even months later. She never mentioned you. She didn't know I was watching. She didn't want to know. That sounds creepy. Junho smiled. Barely. Fair point. She stood up. I have to go. Of course. Don't follow me. I won't. She hesitated. Studied his face like she was trying to read something written there. How do I know any of what you're saying is true? You don't. But you can look me up. Park Junho. Park Logistics. I'm not hard to find. She nodded once. Turned to leave. Imani, he said softly. She stopped. Didn't turn around. I'm here every Thursday. Same time. If you change your mind. Junho watched her walk out. Didn't follow. Didn't try to stop her. He'd handled it wrong. Been too direct. Too honest, maybe. But he had time. Patience. He'd wait. He paid for her coffee on the way out. The following Thursday, he sat at the same table. Didn't really expect her to show. But at 3:17, the bell over the door chimed. Imani walked in. Spotted him immediately. Paused like she was reconsidering. Then walked directly to his table. She didn't sit down. One coffee. That's it. He nodded. That's all I'm asking. He stood up. Gestured to the counter. What would you like? Plain coffee is fine. Let me guess. You always get the cheapest thing on the menu. She frowned. So? Try something different today. My treat. I don't need. It's coffee, Imani. Not a car. She almost smiled. Almost. Fine. Caramel macchiato. Extra shot. He ordered for both of them, her macchiato and a simple espresso for himself. Paid cash. Left a tip that made the barista blink twice. They sat at the corner table. She kept her backpack on her lap like she might need to make a quick exit. So, she said. Start talking. About? This debt you think you owe me. Junho took a sip of his espresso. It's not a debt I think I owe. It's a debt I know I owe. You already told me the story. Your mom. The fire. My grandma. Yes. And you expect me to believe that you've been, what? Watching us for 20 years? Not watching. Just aware. And now you want to help me because she's gone. Yes. Why? Because I pay my debts. There's no debt to pay. My family believes otherwise. Imani sipped her drink. Something shifted in her expression. This is good. The coffee? She nodded. Sometimes the cheapest thing isn't the best thing. She shot him a look. Some of us don't have a choice. Everyone has choices. Just different options. For the next hour, they talked. Not about personal things. Not about her job or his business. Just conversation. Books she was reading. Places in LA he thought were overrated. The merits of Korean food versus soul food. He didn't push. Didn't ask invasive questions. Just listened. She didn't trust him. But she wasn't running either. When they finished, he walked her to the door. Thank you for the coffee, she said. Thank you for the conversation. She hesitated. I still don't understand what you want. Nothing you're not willing to give. She nodded slowly. Goodbye, Mr. Park. Goodbye, Imani. When Imani got home that night, she Googled his name for the first time. The results made her blood run cold. Park Junho. Head of Park Logistics. Suspected connections to organized crime. No charges ever filed. Articles about investigations that went nowhere. Rumors about shipping containers with more than just electronics inside. A profile in the LA Times that called him the most powerful man in Koreatown that no one talks about. She should have walked away. She should have never spoken to him again. Instead, she saved his number in her phone. And 3 days later, she called. Imani knew exactly what Park Junho was. She wasn't stupid. She wasn't naive. She wasn't some girl in a fairy tale who couldn't see the wolf behind the smile. She saw it. All of it. And she chose to stay anyway. Not because she didn't know better. But because, for the first time in years, she felt safe. After that first coffee, after that first real conversation, something changed. It wasn't dramatic. There were no fireworks, no grand declarations. Just a quiet understanding that started to grow between them. A week later, he was waiting outside the warehouse when her shift ended at 7 a.m. Leaning against his car. Not flashy, but expensive. The kind that doesn't advertise its price tag but everyone knows anyway. You're stalking me now, she asked, too tired to sound truly annoyed. I'm offering you a ride. I take the bus. I know. She should have said no. But it was cold, still dark, and the bus wouldn't come for 20 minutes. Just a ride, she said. Nothing else. He nodded. Opened the passenger door. Didn't try to help her in or touch her at all. The inside of his car smelled like leather and something faintly spicy. The seats were heated. The ride was smooth. Hungry? He asked. She should have said no to that too. But she was. Always was after a shift. Usually ate microwave ramen at home because it was cheap. A little, she admitted. He took her to BCD Tofu House on Wilshire. Open 24 hours. Steam rising from stone bowls of spicy soup that warmed her from the inside out. My mother used to make this when I was sick, he said, watching her eat. Said it cured everything. Did it? I'm still here. A pattern formed. Not every night after her shift. Just enough. He seemed to know when she needed it most. When she was too tired. Too cold. Too alone. BCD Tofu House became their place. Late night soup that warmed her bones. Conversations about nothing and everything. He never pushed for more. Never tried to touch her. Just showed up. Consistently. Quietly. The thing that surprised Imani most wasn't that he kept coming back. It was that he actually listened. One night, when she finally felt brave enough to talk about Loretta, he just sat there. Didn't interrupt. Didn't offer solutions or platitudes. Just listened. I miss her every day, Imani said, staring into her soup. Sometimes I still think I hear her voice in the house. He nodded. Didn't say anything. Is that crazy? No, he said simply. It's love. A month into whatever this was, friendship, she supposed, Imani came home from a shift to find a crew of men working on her roof. The leaking roof. The one that had ruined her ceiling and kept her up during rainstorms. A man in work clothes approached her as she stood frozen in her driveway. Ms. Rivers? We're almost done. Should be fixed in about an hour. I didn't hire anyone to fix the roof. The man looked confused. Mr. Park sent us. Said to make sure it was done right. She should have been angry. Should have told them to stop. Should have called Junho and yelled at him for overstepping. Instead, she went inside and cried for 10 minutes straight. When the crew left, the roof didn't leak anymore. Junho didn't mention it the next time they had dinner. Didn't ask for thanks. Didn't bring it up at all. 2 weeks later, she came home to find the water heater replaced. The sink fixed. The broken window in the kitchen repaired. No note. No expectation. Just things that needed fixing, fixed. What Junho didn't do mattered almost more than what he did. He never touched her without permission. He never made her feel like she owed him. He never asked for anything in return. He never explained his business unless she asked. And 3 months into this strange friendship, sitting in his car after another late-night dinner, she finally did ask. What do you actually do? He didn't hesitate. Things that exist in gray areas. That's not an answer. It's the truth. She studied his profile in the dim light. His calm eyes. His steady hands on the steering wheel. Are you dangerous? Yes. Should I be afraid of you? No. His eyes met hers. Never. Not you. That night, Imani made a decision. She didn't fully understand Junho's world. But she understood him. And sometimes, that's enough. Let me stop right here. Because I know what some of you are thinking. You're wondering why Imani would choose to be with a man like Junho. You're wondering if she's making a mistake. And honestly, that's the whole point of this story. It's complicated. It's messy. It's real. Their relationship changed slowly. A touch of hands here. A longer conversation there. Small moments of connection that built into something neither of them had planned. The first time he kissed her was 4 months after they met. Nothing dramatic. They were walking to his car after dinner. It started to rain. He gave her his jacket without a word. And she reached up and kissed him. Simple. Quick. A thank you that turned into something more. He looked surprised. Then smiled. A real smile that reached his eyes. I've been waiting for that, he said quietly. I know. By month 5, she'd stopped working at the warehouse. Started her own financial consulting business with Junho's connections but her own expertise. Small clients at first. Businesses that needed help managing money. She was good at it. Really good. Years of stretching pennies had taught her to see numbers differently. The house in Limert Park started to feel like home again. Not the home it had been with Loretta, that was gone forever, but something new. Something hers. Junho never stayed over. Not until she asked him to. Even then, he seemed hesitant. "You sure?" he asked, standing in her doorway, rain dripping from his coat. "I'm sure," she said, and pulled him inside. 6 months after they met, Junho invited her to Seoul for a business trip. "I want you to see where I'm from," he said over dinner. "Where my family started." She hesitated. It wasn't just a trip. It was a step into his world. The world she'd read about online. The world that existed in those gray areas he talked about. "Okay," she finally said. Yes. They flew first class. Of course they did. Imani had never been on a plane before. Never left California. Never even had a passport until Junho helped her get one expedited. Seoul was nothing like she'd imagined. Bigger. Brighter. More alive somehow. They stayed in the Gangnam district, in a hotel that looked like it belonged in a movie. Rooms with views that made her breath catch. Restaurants where the bill was never presented at the table, just quietly handled by someone in Junho's circle. People bowed to him. Everywhere they went. Not the casual nod of recognition but the deep bow of respect. Of fear, sometimes. She saw things during that week. Things that made his world clear to her. Men who answered to him without question. Meetings behind closed doors, in languages she didn't speak. Rooms that fell silent when he entered. She understood. Fully. Finally. On their last night in Seoul, sitting in a quiet corner of the hotel bar, she said, "This is your life. Part of it. The part you don't talk about. The part I'm willing to show you. If you want to see it." She swirled her drink. Watched the ice melt. "Why me? You could have anyone. Why the girl from the warehouse?" He took her hand. Gentle. Careful. Like she might break. Or run. "Because you're the only person I've met who isn't afraid to ask." They dated for a year. Or something like dating. It didn't have a name. Didn't need one. Imani's business grew. She moved to a small office in Koreatown. Hired an assistant. Started making real money, her money, not his. Junho traveled often. Korea. Japan. China. Sometimes she went with him. Sometimes she stayed. She learned Korean. Not fluent, but enough to understand. Enough to show respect. Enough to surprise his mother, who had been skeptical at first but warmed to her eventually. "You're good for him, son," he told her one afternoon, watching Junho on the phone across the room. He smiles now. Imani's life had changed completely in a year. From rock bottom to something she'd never imagined possible. But she never forgot what it cost to get here. Never forgot Loretta. Never forgot what it felt like to have nothing. So when clients came to her, small businesses, people struggling, she remembered. Worked harder for them. Charged less. Gave back in ways that would have made her grandmother proud. 14 months after they met in that coffee shop, Junho took her to Mingle's restaurant in Gangnam. Private room overlooking the skyline. City lights stretching to the horizon. The kind of place where even the air feels expensive. He seemed nervous. Junho was never nervous. "What's wrong?" she asked after the server left them alone. "Nothing's wrong. You're fidgeting." He looked down at his hands. Smiled slightly. "You notice everything. Only about you." He met her eyes. I'm not a good man, Imani. I've done things. I'll do more. I know. You could have a normal life. A safe life. Someone who doesn't carry what I carry. I could. Then why stay? She reached across the table. Took his hand in hers. Because you're the first person who saw me. Really saw me. When I had nothing, you didn't try to fix me. You just stayed. Something shifted in his face. Something vulnerable that most people never got to see. He slid a small box across the table. Simple. Elegant. A diamond that caught the light but didn't scream for attention. Just like him. I can't promise you normal, he said quietly. But I can promise you this, no one will ever hurt you again. Not while I'm breathing. She looked at the ring. At him. At the life she was choosing. Yes. He exhaled. Something cracked in his composure. Just for a moment. You're sure? I've never been more sure of anything. They married 3 months later. Small ceremony in Seoul. Private. A few of his trusted people. No one from her past, there was no one left to invite anyway. She wore a simple white dress. He wore black. They exchanged vows in Korean. He translated each word for her, whispering in her ear so only she could hear. Afterward, they ate and drank and laughed under cherry blossoms just starting to bloom. Mrs. Park Jun-ho. An identity she kept quiet. No social media. No public appearances. No need to prove anything to anyone. She continued growing her business, now with more resources but still funded primarily by her own work. She insisted on that. Needed to know she'd built something herself. Jun-ho understood. Respected it. Helped when asked but never pushed. Their life together wasn't normal by any standard definition. He traveled often. Sometimes disappeared for days with vague explanations. Sometimes came home with shadows in his eyes that hadn't been there before. She didn't ask about those shadows. Some things were better left in those gray areas. They built something real. Unconventional. Complicated. She didn't love him despite what he was. She loved him because of who he was with her. And he loved her in the only way he knew how, quietly, fiercely, without reservation. 2 years after their wedding, Imani boarded a flight from Incheon to LAX. Routine business trip. Nothing unusual. She had clients to meet in Los Angeles. People who didn't know who her husband was and didn't need to know. She wore a simple black dress. Carried a leather tote bag. Her wedding ring was the only jewelry she wore. 2 of Jun-ho's men traveled with her. Always. Keeping their distance. Keeping her safe. She didn't know that Rashad Mitchell, the man who had destroyed her life, was also at LAX that day. And she didn't know that in approximately 45 minutes, he was going to make the worst decision of his life. He was going to raise his hand. And everything would change. Tuesday morning. 10:47 a.m. Terminal B, LAX. Imani walked through the international arrivals gate wearing a simple black dress, carrying a leather tote, her wedding band catching the fluorescent light. 15 feet behind her, 2 men in tailored suits moved in quiet synchronization. Close enough to protect. Far enough to disappear. She didn't expect to see anyone she knew. She was wrong. Rashad Mitchell wasn't supposed to be at LAX that day. Not in Terminal B anyway. It had been 4 years since he'd left Los Angeles. 4 years of thinking he'd made the right choice. Atlanta hadn't worked out like he planned. Destiny had left him after 8 months, taking half his stuff and all his connections. The tech startup had crashed and burned. The money had dried up faster than he expected. So here he was, back in LA, trying to restart. Living in a cheap apartment in Inglewood that smelled like the previous tenant's cats. Driving a car that broke down twice a week. Wearing suits that used to fit better before he started drinking his meals. He was at the airport to pick up a business contact, some investor who might be his last shot at getting back on his feet. He was early, killing time by walking around, when he saw her. At first, he thought he was imagining things. No. That can't be her. Imani Rivers? Here. But it was her. Definitely her. Same face. Same walk. But different somehow. Wrong. Not wrong bad. Wrong better. The woman he remembered was broken. Desperate. Easy to control. A doormat with daddy issues who cried when he didn't call. This woman walked like she owned the building. Back straight. Head high. Eyes forward. Confidence in every step. Wearing clothes that cost money. Real money. He felt something twist in his gut. Not guilt. Something uglier. More bitter. Envy. Before he knew what he was doing, he was walking toward her. He didn't have a plan. He just couldn't let her pass without knowing. Without confirming that she was still beneath him. That leaving her had been the right choice. That she hadn't won. That was all that mattered. She couldn't win. Imani saw him before he reached her. A face from a different life. A life she'd folded up and put away years ago. She could have turned. Could have avoided him. Could have let her security detail steer her in another direction. But she didn't. She stopped walking and faced him. No surprise on her face. No fear. Just recognition. Like she was looking at a stain she'd forgotten to clean. He stepped directly into her path, blocking her. Imani Rivers. He said her name like it was a joke, like she was a joke. Still pretending you're somebody? She didn't blink. I know exactly who I am. The question is whether you remember what you did. His smile flickered. This wasn't how she was supposed to react. She was supposed to be nervous. Intimidated. Apologetic, even. What I did? He laughed. I did you a favor. You weren't ready for the life I wanted. You mean the life where you steal money from women and run? Watch your mouth. His voice dropped. Or what? People were slowing down around them now, sensing the conflict. A few glanced over, then quickly away, the way people do when they want to watch but don't want to be caught watching. Rashad felt his face getting hot. His voice rose without him meaning it to. You think you're better than me now? Look at you. Playing dress up. Pretending you're someone. He stepped closer, invading her space. You're nothing. You've always been nothing. Imani's voice stayed level. Calm. The only person pretending here is you. His hand moved before his brain caught up. The slap echoed through the terminal like a gunshot. Travelers gasped. A child dropped her toy. Security officers turned their heads. Imani's head moved with the impact, but she didn't stumble. Didn't fall. Didn't cry out. She touched her cheek. Felt the heat blooming under her fingers. Then she looked at him with eyes colder than anything he'd ever seen. You shouldn't have done that. The two men in suits had stopped walking the moment Rashad approached Imani. They'd kept their distance, watching. Assessing. Waiting to see if intervention was necessary. Now, one of them was already on his phone, speaking rapidly in Korean. The other had moved closer, hand inside his jacket. They didn't step in. Not yet. But they didn't take their eyes off Rashad's face for a second. Around them, people were pulling out phones. Recording. Some were whispering to each other. A few looked like they might step in. Security was approaching from the checkpoint, radios in hand. Rashad suddenly realized how many eyes were on him. How public this had become. But he was too angry to stop now. Too invested in putting her back in her place. What are you gonna do, call the cops? He sneered. Go ahead. Tell them your little sob story. No one cared before. No one cares now. Imani lowered her hand from her cheek. I wasn't going to call the cops. Then who? She almost smiled. Almost. My husband. She walked past him without another word. The two men in suits fell into step behind her. Rashad stood in the middle of the terminal, suddenly uncertain. Watching her walk away. Trying to process what she just said. Husband? Security officers approached, asking questions, checking cameras. A supervisor arrived. They talked about pressing charges. Rashad lied. Said it was a misunderstanding. A personal matter. They let him go with a warning. He thought it was over. He was very, very wrong. In the back of a black sedan with tinted windows and leather seats, Imani sat pressing an ice pack to her cheek. Her phone rang. She answered without checking the caller ID. I heard. Junho's voice was calm. Too calm. The kind of calm that made smarter men than Rashad Mitchell run for cover. I'm fine. Your face tells a different story. I saw the security footage. Of course he had. He probably had it sent to him the minute it happened. It's just a bruise. I've had worse. Silence on the other end. Long and heavy. Who was he? Imani closed her eyes. Someone from before. Someone I never told you about. Tell me now. And so she did. Everything. The relationship. The pregnancy. The money. The abandonment. The loss. She told him in a voice that didn't shake, because she'd practiced not shaking for years. When she finished, Junho was quiet for a long time. What do you want me to do? He finally asked. I don't know yet. That wasn't the question. What do you want me to do? She opened her eyes. Looked at the city passing by the window. I want him to understand what he lost. And what he just woke up. Junho hung up the phone. He sat in his office overlooking Koreatown, the city of Los Angeles spread beneath him like a chessboard. He made 2 calls. The first was to his head of security. The second was to a man who specialized in finding people who didn't want to be found. Rashad Mitchell had slapped his wife in public. And Park Junho was about to show him exactly what that mistake would cost. Rashad Mitchell didn't sleep well that night. He told himself it was the cheap mattress. The thin walls. The neighbor's dog barking. But deep down, in a place he didn't like to visit, he knew the truth. Something was wrong. Something he couldn't name yet. Something that felt like a countdown. The next morning started normal enough. Rashad showered. Made coffee. Put on his second-best suit for the big meeting. This investor was his ticket back. The guy had money, connections in tech. All Rashad had to do was show up, smile, and work his magic. He was checking his hair in the mirror when his phone buzzed. A text, opportunity no longer viable. He stared at it. Read it again. He called. Went straight to voicemail. He texted back, there must be some mistake. I'm ready to meet today. Nothing. He emailed. Nothing. Strange. Rashad decided to go to the airport anyway. Maybe the guy's phone was dead. Maybe there was a misunderstanding. He grabbed his keys, headed to his car. It didn't start. Wouldn't start, like it needed a jump. Didn't start, like someone had been under the hood. Like something important was missing. He called a mechanic. Waited 2 hours. Paid money he didn't have. Someone cut your fuel line, man, the mechanic said, looking at him funny. You pissed somebody off? Rashad felt the first real twinge of fear. By the time he got home, things had gotten weirder. He tried to order food. His credit card declined. He checked his bank app. Account frozen. Suspicious activity, the automated system said. He called customer service. Spent 3 hours on hold, getting transferred, going nowhere. I'm sorry, sir. This is above my pay grade. The system flag is locked. What system flag? I'm not authorized to discuss that. You'll need to visit a branch in person. Stranger. At 8 p.m., his landlord knocked on his door. Old guy. Usually cool. Today he looked uncomfortable. You need to be out by Friday, he said, not meeting Rashad's eyes. What? Why? Building's been sold. New owners want everyone out. That's illegal. The landlord shrugged. Take it up with a lawyer. I just work here. Rashad closed the door. Leaned against it. He sat on his bed, staring at his phone. 3 things going wrong at once wasn't coincidence. Someone was doing this. But who? Then he remembered. The airport. The slap. The woman who didn't flinch. The 2 men in suits. The way she said, my husband. His hand started to shake. Rashad wasn't stupid. Selfish, yes. Cruel, sometimes. But not stupid. He opened his laptop. Searched Imani's name. Nothing useful. He tried marriage records. Nothing. He called old friends, people who might know what happened to her after he left. No one knew. Or no one wanted to tell him. But one guy, Marcus, the same cousin who'd had to break the news to Imani years ago, mentioned something. I heard she married some Korean businessman. Big money. Keeps it quiet. Korean. Businessman. Big money. Rashad's blood ran cold. He dug deeper. Found an old article about Park Logistics, a company under investigation for import irregularities. Buried in the article was a photo from some charity event. Park Joon-ho. CEO. Mid-30s. Face like it was carved from stone. And in the background, barely visible, a woman in a simple black dress. Imani. His Imani. Except she wasn't his anymore. She belonged to a man who made his previous life look like a joke. Rashad sat in the dark of his apartment, reading articles he wished he hadn't found. Allegations. Investigations. Rumors of violence that never quite became convictions. People who crossed Park disappeared. Not in body bags, that would be too obvious. They just lost everything. Jobs. Homes. Reputations. Park Joon-ho wasn't a businessman. He was something else entirely. And Rashad had slapped his wife. In public. On camera. For the first time in his life, Rashad Mitchell understood what real fear felt like. 3 days later, Rashad was packing what little he had left. His landlord wasn't kidding. The eviction notice was real. The bank account was still frozen. His car had mysteriously been towed for parking violations. He was down to clothes, a laptop, and about $200 in cash. A knock at the door. He froze. Then relaxed. Probably just the landlord checking if he was leaving. He opened it. 2 men in tailored suits stood there. The same ones from the airport. Mr. Mitchell. The taller one spoke. His voice was soft. Polite. Terrifying. You're going to come with us. Rashad tried to sound confident. Failed. I'm not going anywhere. That wasn't a request. Rashad tried to close the door. It didn't budge. The shorter man had his foot in the doorway. We're not here to hurt you, the taller one continued. Our employer just wants a conversation. And if I say no? The man smiled. It didn't reach his eyes. You won't. The SUV had tinted windows. Leather seats. That new car smell. Nobody spoke during the drive. Rashad thought about jumping out at a red light, but something told him they'd catch him before he made it 10 feet. They drove for 40 minutes. Into Koreatown. Stopped at a building on Wilshire. Glass and steel. No sign outside. The lobby was empty except for a security guard who nodded at the two men. The elevator needed a key card. It took them to a floor that didn't have a button. A private floor. A private office. And there, behind a desk that probably cost more than Rashad's entire life, sat Park Joon-ho. He was younger than Rashad expected. Calmer. Not what you'd picture when you think gangster. That somehow made it worse. Joon-ho didn't stand. Didn't speak. Just watched. Rashad's bravado had evaporated somewhere on the drive over. You wanted to see me, he finally said, hating how his voice shook. I wanted to see the man who raised his hand to my wife. Look, that was a misunderstanding. No. It wasn't. Silence stretched between them. The kind that made you want to fill it with words, confessions, apologies, anything to make it stop. Rashad resisted. Barely. Do you know who I am, Mr. Mitchell? I'm starting to figure it out. Then you understand why you're here. Rashad's mouth went dry. Are you going to kill me? Joon-ho tilted his head. Almost smiled. That would be too easy. And too kind. You took something from my wife, Joon-ho said, his voice calm, conversational. Money, dignity, years she'll never get back. I can't return those. But I can make sure you never take from anyone again. What does that mean? Rashad asked, though he was starting to understand. It means your name is now flagged in every financial system I have influence over. Which is many. Joon-ho folded his hands on the desk. You won't get a loan. You won't get a lease. You won't get a credit card. You are financially invisible. Rashad felt the walls closing in. You can't do that. I already have. I'll go to the police. With what? Joon-ho raised an eyebrow. I've done nothing illegal. I've simply made recommendations to colleagues who trust my judgment. This is America. You can't just. Mr. Mitchell, Joon-ho cut him off. You seem to be under the impression that power works the same everywhere. It doesn't. In your world, money talks. In my world, money whispers, and people listen very carefully. Rashad's mind raced. Trying to find an angle. A way out. What if I leave town? Go somewhere else? You already tried that once. How did Atlanta work out? Rashad's stomach dropped. He knew about Atlanta. Joon-ho stood. Walked around the desk. Stopped inches from Rashad's face. If you ever speak to her again. If you ever look at her again. If you even think her name too loudly. I will hear about it. And then? Joon-ho leaned closer. Voice barely a whisper. Then I stopped being kind. The meeting was over. The two men from before appeared at Rashad's side. He was escorted out. Driven for what felt like hours. Dropped on a street corner in Koreatown. Alone. His phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. Every choice has a cost. You're paying yours now. 1 week later, Imani sat on the porch of her grandmother's house. Not the house it had been when Loretta was alive. That house had leaking pipes and a sagging roof and too many memories that hurt. This house she'd rebuilt. New roof. New floors. New paint. But the same bones. The same heart. She'd turned it into something beautiful. Joon-ho sat beside her, their hands intertwined. Watching the sunset over Limerick Park. How do you feel? He asked. I thought I'd feel angry. Or satisfied. But I just feel done. Done? With him. With that part of my life. With giving him any more of my energy. He squeezed her hand. Your grandmother would be proud. Imani smiled. The first real smile in weeks. I know. And she did. Loretta Rivers hadn't raised her to seek revenge. She'd raised her to survive. To keep going. To build something from nothing. And that's exactly what Imani had done. She had built a life from ashes. She had married a man the world feared and found peace in his shadow. She had been slapped in public by the man who destroyed her, and watched karma come for him on silent feet. She was no longer Imani Rivers, the broken girl from South Central. She was Imani Park. And she had won. That's the end of Imani's story. A story about betrayal. About survival. About the moment a man realized he had just made the worst mistake of his life. But here's the thing, this story almost didn't get made. Every video on this channel takes time, energy, and resources. And without your support, there won't be more stories like this one. So if Imani's journey meant something to you, if you felt anger when Rashad slapped her, satisfaction when karma caught up, and peace when she finally found happiness, then I'm asking you to do one thing. Smash that subscribe button and let me know in the comments where you're watching from. Tell me what you thought of Imani's story. Tell me what you want to hear next. Because as long as you keep watching, I'll keep telling stories that matter. See you in the next one.